And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Over 150,000 new cases of the coronavirus today. Congratulations. We are breaking records, folks. We are winning. Are you tired of winning yet? Because evidently this is winning. We're breaking records. I don't know that they're good records. We're seeing states across the country at maximum capacity for their healthcare units. The sleepy little county that I am is now seeing an expansion. The schools are back to possibly closing. Evidently, we just don't learn. And this is one of those moments where I have to go, remember all those people who said it's a hoax? Remember all those folks who are going, well, once the election's over, it's just going to go away. Once November 3rd happens, on the 4th, like magic, it'll disappear. Well, we're reaching new highs every day, new records every single day, and it's going to get worse. Now, fortunately, we might be somewhere near okay-ish because they've reported that we've cut the death rate down because they've come up with some treatments. They've learned how to, try to mitigate some things. If you catch it early, you do a bunch of stuff. They're slowing it down. Still deadly, still dangerous, and still going to stick with you because some of the people I've talked to who have had it, still after months, are feeling the effects of it. Not something we want. Not something we want to spread. Not something we want to get. But we've got a guy who, where's Waldo now? Did I miss him today? Is he given any coronavirus task force meetings? Because we're still sort of paying him to do his job. Evidently not. Evidently, Kayleigh McEnany, the press secretary, says when the moment's right, he will appear from his hovel. He will pop out like the groundhog here in Pennsylvania, and maybe he sees his shadow, and we only have a couple more months left of him. And then we can be done with it. Now, I do fully expect him to announce he's running in 2024, so he will be our thorn in our side. And this is one of those moments where I go, now seems like a good time to just start tuning him off. Because what I'm kind of fed up with already is people going, he's not going to concede. Of course he's not going to concede. He was never going to concede. Please stop thinking that someone who's incapable of doing something will eventually do it. Please stop with the Republican Party, Donald Trump. Please stop with they're eventually going to do the right thing. Can we do that now? Can we just admit as a country, go, look, they're never gonna do the right thing. They're gonna do what they think is best for them and them alone. Country be damned. Patriotism that they love to wave the flag over be damned. It's about their part of it. And look, you can argue, the Democrats do the same thing. That's the problem with our politics. This both sidesism. I think Joe Biden is one of those guys, and again, wasn't my first choice. I think he is a guy who's going to try and do some of the things I think need to be done. Going to move us forward. Now, what's really interesting is the administration is doing nothing to help in that transition. And you knew that was going to happen. They are going to get gridlocked. They are going to delay. And they're not going to concede. And I wonder how long it goes before Republicans act on some of the words that they've said. Because a couple of them have said by Friday, if Biden isn't getting the presidential daily briefings and the transition stuff that they need, that they're going to do some actions. Not holding my breath. But it would be something I think would be much needed. And maybe a moment where the Republican Party rids themselves of Trump. Because I don't think the party can heal. I don't think they can be a functional party anytime Trump is around them. But maybe this could be that purge moment where they finally have to stand up like big boys and girls and have to do something about it. But until then, we're going to continue to have massive increases in the virus. It's now, in my view, it's now, there's no putting the genie in the bottle. We are going to have to figure out how to get through this. Because look, by the time Joe Biden becomes president, January 20th of 2021, and no, there is no way possible Joe can take over early. There's none of that. But January 20th, 2021, going to be too late. As one of my friends who has sent me his models has pointed out, by January 1st, we're expecting a 9/11 every day. Going to be too late. And we're stuck with what we've got. We're stuck with the horse that brought us this situation, that failed to react to it properly, and we're gonna have to live with this. Or as Joe Biden said during the debate, we're gonna have to die with it. It just is what it is. Now, are there states that are going, hey, maybe we should do something a little different? Maybe we should think about what we're doing. Maybe some mandates, some mask stuff. Maybe. We're seeing Massachusetts doing some stuff. We're seeing New York doing some stuff. Interestingly enough, it's the states that didn't vote for Trump. And you got to kind of wonder, is it this insanity of, I'm sticking with my guy and whatever my guy says? It's crazy. And I keep going back to this moment. I keep going back to last January and imagining what if. And I know this is one of those exercises that, as I started off with, it's impossible to have had happen because they're never going to do the right thing. It's always what's in their best political interest at that very moment. But had Donald Trump come out and said, look, this is what we know. We know this virus that came from China is deadly. We strongly suspect that it's passed through the air. We think people should be wearing masks. It's not weak. You're not less macho. We're just going to slow the spread of it because everybody breathes air. Everyone has to be on this planet together. Let's figure out how we calm some of that down. And I'm calling on my patriots. My flag waving, red hat wearing, Trump t-shirt with no sleeves wearing, solid supporters to go out there and enforce my call for a mask. Had he done that, we're talking major blowout election. Had you empowered the people who want to be authoritarian, who want to tell people what to do because, well, they don't in real life, had you given them that mandate to go out and tell Karen to shut up and put on a mask, we wouldn't be in this mess. Instead, what we got was, the mouth breathers and the knuckle draggers and the flag wavers and the Karens and the Kens and the rest of them going, I'm American. I'm free. I can breathe all over you. And here we are, 150,000 cases. Tomorrow's going to be more. Day after is going to be more than that. It's math. You can't make this up. And we're going to have to suffer through it. Because some of us failed biology class. Now, I'll be the first to admit I didn't do really well in biology. But I did well enough to know that, well, what we've done is not a good thing. So we're going to suffer through it. Now, another record, and a good record. We had like one of the top participation rates in an election in our country's history. Going back to the election of 1900 and 1908, we had, they're saying it's something like 63.9% of eligible voters actually bothered to vote. 63.9. Now, I personally think that's still pathetic, but it is at one of the highest. In fact, the highest portion of an election since 1908, which was 65.7%. And go back to 1900 and 1908. Well, women still couldn't vote yet, so we didn't have to get all of them out to vote. The pool was much smaller. You couldn't get Asian Americans didn't vote. I guess Native Americans didn't get the vote. The non-white folks, we didn't have to worry about them because they didn't register because we wouldn't let them. So I think it's pretty incredible that we got that kind of a turnout. I still think it's pathetic when a third of the country goes, I don't care enough. I don't care enough to do something as simple as fill in a little bubble on a piece of paper. It's just crazy. But all I keep hearing from people is all of these claims. There's all this voter fraud out there. The one today is, there's another postal employee who overheard someone say something about something, and they think this is widespread voter fraud. And I find it interesting that the Department of Homeland Security, the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. Now, this is Trump's Department of Homeland Security. These are the people that work under his administration. They have called this past election the most secure in American history. Now, that's not saying. Now, let me stop before everyone goes, "Oh, I saw the video. There were people doing things." I'm not saying that there aren't some irregularities. There aren't some things that were wrong. I'm not saying there wasn't isolated incidents of this or that, because there always are. And what we do is we find them and we hold them accountable with really draconian penalties. But as far as elections go, this one, and I've said this for a couple of days now, this one was the most secure ever. It's not like the good old days where they had someone walk into the polling place with you and look over your shoulder as you were voting. It's not like the good old days when they were taking the box out the back and shoving a whole bunch of extra ballots in there. Wasn't that? But to hear my Trump supporter friends lose their ever-loving freaking minds over each little incident that we're now finding out, most of them are made up. Most of them are dreamt up. Most of them aren't anywhere close to reality, but they get attention. And this is the problem with this attention society that we have, this instant media, this instant celebrity. If you happen to see something, like this Richard Hooker guy from Erie, he's now an instant celebrity on who knows which side, because he recanted after they explained to him, you do know if you lie, it's perjury. You do know if you're making this up, potentially you're going to go to jail. You do know this is serious. It's not just making an allegation to playing the game of telephone or whatever. This is real serious stuff. And generally when people make stuff up like this, they generally go, well, I made a mistake. Oops, sorry. But this is one of those moments where, look, I am not going to say this election is free of error, because we're talking about human beings. But the reality is, in every one of those polling places, there was a Democrat and there was a Republican. The system was working. For me, where the system breaks down and isn't working is because there's still a third of the country that isn't voting, more than a third. For whatever reason that is. Some of it is structural, some of it is hopeless, some of it is they just don't want to be bothered. But if it's the structural part, if it's the machinery, we should be able to fix this. We should be able to make voting so much easier. We should be able to expand this and make sure that no one gets thrown off of it. And we don't have the kind of intimidation that we're seeing coming out of this White House. The fact that there are 3,000 names on a list that the GOP is targeting, claiming, and a lot of them are military people, claiming that they voted in another state, but they're living in somewhere else, is kind of crazy. Because here's the thing. There aren't many of those. You going to find 50,000 of those in the state of Pennsylvania? No. And what you're seeing is these secretaries of state saying, look, it's not going to change the outcome. The guy in Georgia, not going to change the outcome. We're going to count all the votes. Doesn't mean it's going to change the outcome. And I want every vote counted. We all should. Which is why, again, you look at these frivolous lawsuits that Trump keeps throwing out in the hopes that maybe he can drum up enough anger among the people. Because all this is about, this isn't about him figuring out how to legally get the win. This is about him continuing to divide us, to continue to pit us against one another, so that we're literally fighting each other without actually looking at the reality that Donald Trump lost. And it is what it is, to use his phrase. Actually, it was John Locke's phrase, but, I digress. Everything now is Donald Trump's. Donald Trump lost. And now we have to figure out, how do we move forward as a country? Because we can do a couple of things. We can continue to fight each other. We can continue to butt heads. Like I got an email today from Kelly Loeffler, who came out and was very honest. I give the appointed senator from Georgia credit for being honest. In the subject line, she said, "My plan to destroy Joe Biden." Not even the nicety of Mitch McConnell of, we're going to make him a one-term president. No, we're going to destroy him. It's not about just the politics. It's personal now. How dare he beat our dear leader? And of course, with him, a lifelong moderate, with him, all of these horrible liberal policies. He's going to be the most liberal president ever. And here's the thing. We need some of that right now. We need someone who's going to help folks at the bottom, because I don't know if you figured this out, but we're not going back to the way things were anytime soon, if ever. There's a lot to be done, a short period of time to do it, and this is the moment where, as someone who believes in government, a government of, for, and by we the people, this is the moment for government to shine. And this is the moment where you need people who believe in government, to believe in an institution that can do the things that we individually cannot do, but want to collectively to move us forward. That's what we need from our government. And with Donald Trump at the helm, or wherever he is now, whatever hole he's in at this moment, that ain't happening. In fact, all I get is he's firing people at an alarming rate. And I can't imagine that it's for the good of the country. It's because, well, he's just angry. It just is what it is. Anyway, I got a lot to get to today. Quick break. Right back.
On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1996. That was the day the United Steelworkers and Bridgestone Firestone finally reached a tentative settlement after a bitter 28-month dispute. After years of restructuring and decline, the company demanded massive concessions from the workforce. By July 1994, 4,000 members of the United Rubber Workers walked off the job at 5 plants across the country. They were on strike against wage and benefit cuts, the loss of holidays and union protections. They also rejected the company's attempt to institute a grueling 12-hour, 7-day work week and a 2-tier wage scale. The company permanently replaced more than half of the workforce 6 months into the strike. When the NLRB was slow to answer numerous unfair labor practice complaints, the United Rubber Workers called off the strike the following May. The company refused to reinstate hundreds of strikers, including 2 local presidents fired for union activity. Those who did return came back to plants filled with scabs. Though the strike may have ended, a campaign for justice continued when the United Rubber Workers merged with the United Steelworkers. Historian Robert Weir notes that in launching its international campaign, the United Steelworkers publicized the company's pollution problems, its safety and health violations, and intolerable working conditions. It also forged an important link with a militant Japanese union Zenroiko, raising fears that the strike could spread to Bridgeport's home operations. Protests, demonstrations, and boycotts continued throughout 1996 until the NLRB finally answered unfair labor practices brought against the company. The final settlement included the rehiring of all strikers, a wage increase, and all workers' original demands except one. Production speed up would continue.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, fortunately, there are a couple of Republican senators, not really profiles encouraged, but a couple of folks who have stepped forward and said, look, it's time for Joe Biden to get the presidential daily briefings, intelligence reports. It's time for him to get the stuff that's going to help him move towards a transition. You've got Langford from Oklahoma, Rubio, Rounds, and Romney also chimed in. Also, my senator in Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, said, and you got to love how they just kind of go to a point. He said, well, we're on a path. It looks like likely Joe Biden is going to be the next president. So I think, transition process ought to begin. He thinks it's going to look that way. It just is what it is. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are in this no concession era. I've asked our good friend Sarah Kendzior to come talk with us. Sarah is the author of The View from Flyover Country and her latest book, Hiding in Plain Sight. You can get both of those at Amazon and Powell's Books. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I've said there's going to be no concession. We shouldn't expect a concession. We should have never expected a concession. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying since 2016 that he wasn't going to concede this election, and the only way to get rid of him would be through criminal indictments or a very rigorous impeachment process, neither of which happened. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly how this is going to end or when it's going to end. I'm hoping that, Biden continues to behave as the president-elect. I think as he increasingly does this and that becomes the normal way that people think of him, which is how they should think of him because he won the election, that they'll just help shatter this, illusion that the Trump crime cult continues to build up of Trump as being undefeatable, as being eternal, and so on and so forth. But it's definitely not going to be pretty.
No, and I don't have any faith in the Republican Party to step up to him. And in fact, I'm surprised. The reason I led in with this, I'm actually surprised that there are some who are saying, it's time. It's time we start making this transition. You give him the information they need. I'm actually surprised by that.
There's something interesting going on, which is that some of the sleaziest, worst Republican operatives and backers are backing away from Trump. Like last night, Karl Rove, who had a hand in manipulating past elections, seemed surprised by the outcome of this one, suddenly said, that Trump's got to go. He should concede. What's done is done. I think Sheldon Adelson, who's the biggest donor to the Republican Party and one of Trump's, key people, the embassy in Jerusalem was created on the, orders of Sheldon Adelson. I think his name is even emblazoned on it. He's a one-issue donor. His issue is Israel, and so Trump did everything he wanted. He's now backed away from Trump. So you're getting these really shady, horrible players, but who are nonetheless very powerful, especially very powerful within the Republican Party, moving away from him. And I think that may be indicative of a broader move. If donors are withdrawing their money, that may be what is prompting these governors and senators to suddenly say, oh, yeah, Biden should be treated as president-elect. Like not some, dawning of conscience or something like that. It's probably about greed, but it does, signal maybe what direction we may be headed in.
So possibly, we've been having these conversations over the last 4 years. I'm hoping this comes to an end. Do you have any hope going forward that this kind of we pull back from the edge of the abyss?
I mean, it is possible that Trump himself will not be in the White House anymore, and that Joe Biden will become the president. Because he's the president-elect. It's critical that he win this election, and he did win this election. That's not going to get rid of the systemic problems that helped create, Trump's rise, systemic racism, economic decline, and now a full-on Great Depression. It's also not going to get rid of the transnational crime syndicate that are Trump's backers, that have fully infiltrated not only the Republican Party, but all of our government institutions. Like, people need to think really hard about the long-term national security implications of the Trump administration, because they now know everything, every bit of classified information about this country, every bit of dirt on any political actor in the United States, outside the United States. They're going to weaponize it. They're going to probably sell it. I think they may be in the process of selling some of our weaponry. I don't know whose hands that's going to fall into. And I'm also nervous about all these firings, at the DOD, about Trump's lust for nuclear war, about the fact that he's surrounded by people who want to go to war with Iran. Like, if Trump feels like he's got nothing to lose and has a, kind of old man bucket list that includes dropping a nuke, like, this would be when it happens. And I'm really hoping it doesn't. But, we're not out of the woods yet. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
No. I mean, the fact that you've laid that out, even January 20th, 2021 doesn't end the disaster then, because, as you've said, he still has all this information. They still have all these contacts, and he's still going to be getting the presidential daily briefings into the future. I mean, at some point, do you pull that back from him?
They should absolutely be pulling that back from him. I mean, they need to cut that off from him, from Kushner. The problem is our institutions, they were gutted and then they were packed with lackeys. So I don't trust their integrity anymore. Like, Biden is going to have to do some kind of sweep. There were a lot of people who were let in, even though they did not pass a standard security clearance procedure. And those people need to be let out. Like, they need to review who is fired, who is hired. Like, we know that people were unjustly fired, people like Alexander Vindman, for example. Those people should be allowed back in, I think, if they want to return to service. Like, it's going to be a mess. And, with the good thing, obviously, is that at least there's the potential to make this better, because all that's happened for the last 4 years is we've just steadily gotten worse. Like, every day has been worse than the day before it. Like, it never got better. It was always a barrage of horrific news. And I think some of the shock last weekend was like, wow, full on good news. And that's why everybody was outside, like, partying and really excited. And, the next 4 years won't be quite like that. It's not going to be like, a joyful time. I think it's going to be a difficult time, but at least it's leading to something better. That's what I see as possible, is that if people work hard, if they bring accountability, if they prosecute and investigate these criminals and tell the truth to the American public, I think that we can, start to repair some of the damage that was done. And then, of course, they have to look at these broader systemic issues, all this inequality that helped bring a demagogue, a racist demagogue, into power to begin with. So there's just a ton of work to do. But it's kind of nice, I think, to have the opportunity to do that work, and for, a broad swath of the American population to be able to participate in that work. I hope that that's the kind of direction Biden wants to go, like, very inclusive, very straightforward, talking to the people. No more elitism, which has characterized prior administrations before Trump, and then Trump is his own corrupt brand of elitism. Like, we have to be done with that. Like, it needs to be a government truly for the people.
No, that whole of, for, and by the people thing. That would be nice. That would be refreshing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just could work. I mean, it's never really been tried before. It could actually work. But I did want to ask you about the firings, because over the last couple of days, they fired, I think, like 9 or 10 people in fairly key positions. And the latest one coming out today is this guy who's the assistant director, potentially the assistant director of cybersecurity for Homeland Security. This Brian Ware, that I guess is being fired or on the way out the door. It seems to me like there's just, he's just, whatever political, axe he wants to grind at this moment, they're canning people and setting Biden up for what could be horrible. In fact, Andy Card worried that, the Bush guy, that we could be, kind of moving towards allowing another 9/11 to happen, because we're not having a seamless transition.
Oh, I think that's absolutely what they're trying to do. I think they're definitely trying to create the conditions for a massive terrorist attack or an infrastructure hack. That's been something I've been worried about the entire time that he's been in office. I think that may be combined with aggressive U.S. activity abroad. They're making moves towards Iran. We've seen Pompeo doing that. But yeah, they're basically making it so that there's no oversight or regulation of things that we need to protect ourselves, cybersecurity, clean air and water. And then also just eliminating military personnel, having people in acting positions, leaving those positions vacant. That also means that, when you don't have like a what's it called? Sorry, a confirmed person in that office, there's less accountability. And so that whoever is going to fill that role can, get away, especially in a lame duck presidency, with all kinds of horrific action. And so I don't know exactly where this is going. I don't think it's anywhere good. I don't want to terrify people, but of course, one of the first things I thought of is, they're gearing up for some kind of terrorist attack or to allow, our enemies to attack us. But of course, in this case, you have Trump himself aligned with, a transnational mafia syndicate, with a variety of autocrats, many of whom openly hate the United States. He may want them to attack us. So we've never had a situation exactly like this before. And I hope that others in the government just see this, as the obvious threat that it is, and are taking extra precautions to prevent it and to protect the public. Obviously, that would be ideal, but Trump's doing everything possible to get rid of people who would conduct that kind of, national security procedure. So that's very frightening.
No, it is frightening. He fires the defense secretary. He fires the Defense Department's chief of staff. And replaces it with a Devin Nunes lackey. You got rid of the Undersecretary of Defense at the Pentagon. You got rid of the acting Undersecretary of Defense Policy at the Pentagon. You just start looking at the people that they've gotten rid of, the heads of 3 federal agencies that oversee nuclear weapons, electricity and natural gas regulation, and oversee aid. There's just the guy who was the chief scientist in our climate change fight. Mm-hmm. All of these people that are just canning and leaving wide open. I know there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it, but it just seems as chaotic as the last 4 years have been.
Yeah, I think there is rhyme and reason to it. It's just that these are all positions that are in place to protect the American public from incredible threats, like threats of violence. It's not just like he randomly picked out a whole bunch of different positions that have nothing to do with each other. There's a commonality to it, and that's the really frightening thing. And I think the media kind of has tried to avoid this. They're sort of, playing down the coup attempt, and so on and so forth. But, this is part of a continuous chipping away at our national security. He has let our cybersecurity in particular just, rot, just decline. We are very, very vulnerable to a grid attack, for example, right now. And that's been true, for the entire duration of his tenure in office. And I'm also afraid of, his international collaborators and what they want. We know Netanyahu is extremely close to Kushner. We know that Kushner makes more policy than Trump because he's not exactly a geopolitical strategist over there, and neither is Kushner for that matter. And so he takes his cues from Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is imperiled right now. Israelis have been protesting him for 20 weeks. They want him out. And, what might benefit all of them is a war in Iran. And that's something that all these freaks surrounding Trump, like Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, Barr, they've all been gunning for that war for decades. And I keep thinking, and it's obviously an insane and horrible idea. And I think if it were happening during Trump's regular term, it would be met with outcry. But there's 68 days or something left. They may just start something that then maybe Joe Biden has to deal with if he comes in. Or maybe, my worst nightmare is that they use a nuke, and that they find some justification for it. They've, this is an interesting thing. They changed the nuclear posture review in 2018 to say that if a country, cyber attacks us, we can use nuclear weapons in response. And then they let down all of our cybersecurity guards, so it becomes really easy for any country to cyber attack us. And then they say that Iran is playing around in that area. So I'm just sort of watching all these pieces put together like, oh God, please don't let this be what I think it's going to be. And hopefully it won't be. So, but if, you work in national defense and this didn't occur to you, this is a good time to pay attention.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I keep hearing my Trump supporter friends saying, how much Donald Trump loves the country and how he's a patriot and how they're patriots for wanting to set aside the election. Voters be damned. Donald Trump won. They believe it. They believe to their core it was stolen, Sarah. The election was stolen.
See that's weird. Like, I feel like you've got a bad sampling. Like, not like the, majority of the Trump crowd is, logical or something, but I read some survey that only like 3% of Americans think that, Trump won the election, and then there was like some sort of group that wasn't sure, but like 80% think it's Biden. Like, the majority of the country recognizes that Biden won, including, over half of Republicans. So, obviously there's going to be these diehard fanatics who, no matter what you show them, they're going to say that Trump is their president,
right.
He's their leader, now he's martyred, now he's the great victim, and Trump loves that. He always tries to feed into that pathology. And so that's frightening, because I think if people truly believe that about him, if they truly believe that, this was an unjust election and that he was framed or screwed over or something like that, I don't know what they're going to do, but I know that Trump will encourage the worst and most violent behavior possible, from those fans of his. And I really hope that they ignore him, that they just think, well, what are the long-term repercussions of this? Like, is this really who I want to be as a human being? And,
you're
don't
right.
act on those demands.
And the reason I bring it up is because, I get this from a lot of the social media people, because Trump and the Steve Bannons of the world and these right-wing cranks who make their living off of riling people up, they're still putting stuff out. And I look at Facebook, who just said that, Steve Bannon didn't violate enough of their policies to be banned when he basically called for the beheading of Anthony Fauci and Christopher Wray and to have their heads put on spikes outside the White House. That wasn't far enough.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And Facebook had like a brief flirtation with ethical behavior that seems to have ended. And I hope that, the Biden administration, when it comes in, they should be taking steps, to regulate that kind of violent threat, especially from a prominent figure, and especially one that was a former government official. It's wildly over the top. We know that Fauci had to have armed security with him because of serious threats to his life. Like, it's just a continual disgusting thing that I think Americans have gotten used to. Like, the Trump administration and its lackeys, like Bannon, have threatened so many public servants. Like, we hear about it all the time, like governors that are, subject to kidnapping plots, and all the impeachment witnesses needing security, judges needing security, judges having their relatives killed, when they open the door. Like, we're living in a mafia state, and people don't want to confront that fact. But that's been the case the whole time, and that is one of my great fears as we have this tradition that this transition that these mafia tactics will continue to be employed, not just sort of organic Trump fan violence on the streets or something like that, but like plots, the kind of things that Putin carried out in Russia, like very deliberate assassinations, bombings, etc., in order to maintain power.
And the hope is we put a stop to it. And hopefully the next administration does it. Sarah, as always, I appreciate your time. Good stuff. Thanks so much.
No, thank you.
Our good friend Sarah Kendzior. Make sure you check out her work. Books are fantastic. We'll get links out. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day that healthcare workers in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, walked off the job in a wildcat strike. Budget cuts in Alberta, under the leadership of Premier Ralph Klein, had hit healthcare particularly hard. A massive restructuring plan called for deep cuts, privatization, and reducing services. As part of this trend, the Calgary Regional Health Authority had decided to contract out the work of 120 laundry personnel. The workers were members of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 8. The laundry workers walked off the job in protest. Soon, they were joined in solidarity on the picket line by housekeepers, orderlies, nurses, and other hospital workers. 8 hospitals across the city were impacted by the walkout. Community members joined in and marched on the picket lines, frustrated by the government cuts. Twice, the Labor Relations Board ordered the workers to go back to their jobs. Twice, the workers refused. The strike spread to Calgary, where more than 2,500 healthcare workers walked off the job. In Edmonton, workers stood ready to strike. Talk of a general strike began to circulate. In Calgary, the union met with management for a 19-hour marathon bargaining session, and the 10-day strike ended. The health authority agreed to wait 8 months before contracting out any labor. Workers were given severance packages, and the government stopped any further cuts to the industry. But the settlement did little to appease the dissatisfaction of the healthcare workers. The strike had also shown the potential connections between workers' issues on the job and the concerns of community members. The cutbacks hurt both labor and the general public and brought them together to stand in solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, 150,000 new cases of the virus. So it looks like, potentially down the road we're heading for another shutdown. And it looks like, Trump has completely given up at this point. I don't know where Waldo is at the moment, but clearly not doing anything on the virus front. In fact, he did everything he could possibly do to be super spreader in chief during the election. Now we see Mitch McConnell being, Mitch McConnell. He has come out and said that the Democrats, they may want a big coronavirus package. Probably not going to happen. He said it's not a place that he thinks they're willing to go, which means those of you who are going to be suffering and struggling, you're not going to get any help from Mitch McConnell and our Republican friends. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are, where we're going in the transition that we cannot wait for on January 20th, 2021. I've asked Sarah Nelson to come talk with us. Sarah's the president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Always happy to be on the Rick Show.
I always love having you, especially on our Super Sarah Day. I'm looking at the numbers. The numbers not good, not good, and getting worse every day. Thoughts on where you see things going?
Oh, gosh. Yesterday we got good news that Biden has chosen Ron Klain to be his chief of staff. And I say that because I have experience working with Ron Klain. Worked with him in 2014 when we stopped the spread of the Ebola virus. And I have to tell you, that's no small task. That's coordinating with transportation, that's using science and resources from the United States to go to the source of contagion in West Africa, fight that, get good information to everyone, have a really coordinated plan with the proper tools to be able to stop it. Oftentimes it's hard to prove success stories because all anybody experiences is the success, and they don't have to deal with the crisis. But the people who worked so hard to avoid the crisis make that possible for us. And I saw that firsthand with Ron Klain. But he's a really great individual and can quickly bring together a lot of facts from a lot of different places and synthesize a plan that makes sense to people, communicate that easily, and actually take into consideration all of the experts on the ground while doing it.
Yeah.
So he's a phenomenal person. But really what that does is it just shows the difference of what could have been done here. I mean, this is the United States of America. This has been deadly. It has been horrendous. It has been horrible for the people living in this economy. The stock market is not the economy. And it all could have been avoided. I know we could have been part of healing the entire world. And instead, we have become a pariah to the rest of the world. We're not even allowed to leave. People, I have a U.S. passport that I have to keep in my purse as a current flight attendant, ready to go anywhere in the world, anytime. And it is no good. It's no good because we're not even allowed to go anywhere in the world right now because no one trusts America. That's what this guy has done to us.
No, and that's why I'm hoping, January 20th, things turn around. And I looked at his, Joe Biden's coronavirus task force, and I was happy to see that there were, I know this is going to be a shock, actual doctors and actual epidemiologists and actually people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, Rick, we had the slow burn over these last 4 years to accept the crazy. And I saw it during the government shutdown in January 2019, almost 2 years ago now. I can't believe that. But, Donald Trump was not interested in a political solution there. It was all about chaos. And the wall was just a metaphor for what he was doing to the entire country, dividing us.
Excellent point.
And he didn't want solutions there. He didn't want solutions. So it actually took labor taking control and taking it out of the political analysis. I was listening to you talk about Mitch McConnell. Where does Mitch McConnell stand? What are the Democrats doing? I mean, this has been complete and total, bullshit the entire time. And we have been on a ride. And Donald Trump never wanted anyone to have any relief. He doesn't want them to have it now. The only way we're going to get it is not by sort of trying to make sense out of what Mitch McConnell is saying, but actually demanding it. I mean, 8 million people have fallen into poverty. More people are going to. And I just want to know, I want to remind everybody who's listening or people who have not heard this before. In March, aviation unions, 80% organized in our industry, we had the power to make the industry negotiate with us before the plan went to Congress. And so we got the only workers first relief package in all of the coronavirus relief that is not a corporate bailout. We flipped it on its head. We said all the money has to go to covering the pay and benefits of the workers. There can be no involuntary furloughs. There can be no cuts to hourly rates. Oh, and we are going to cap executive compensation for 2 years, and we're going to ban stock buybacks for a year after the relief is depleted. And that carried us through September 30th. Everyone thought that we would be in a place of recovery by then, but we're still right in the middle, in fact, in a worse position than we were last March with coronavirus, with the cases that are climbing. So we've got to get this extended. This is the best template for every other industry, and we need to have something that Biden can use for everyone else going forward. Meanwhile, we've got aviation workers out of work, half my union out of work and without healthcare. These are the people who were on the front lines of coronavirus from the very beginning, and this is how they're being treated by their country. When, if this went to the Senate floor today, it would have 95 votes in favor.
No, you're absolutely right. And I look at what the chairman of the Federal Reserve said today, that, we're recovering, but it's going to be a different economy going forward. He said that, we're accelerating a lot of the things that were going to happen, the use of technology, automation, telework, things like that. And, for me, we're still mired in this kind of, butting heads, and we're not dealing with, one, the problems right in front of us, but also the problems that are going to come, once we get to the other side of this, because there's no going backward. And my frustration is during this time that we've had over the summer, and there was kind of a lull, our elected leaders have done virtually nothing to prepare for what's going to be the next couple of months, and then what's going to be the aftermath.
You said it. That's exactly right. And keywords there, no going back. So Congress is used to making legislation retroactive. They can do that with tax law. Sure, fine. You can't restore people's lives. You can't restore their homes. You can't restore the people who got too much in despair through this whole thing and took their own lives. You can't restore a family that's been broken up because of the financial stress and strain. You can't restore those things. Those things are not retroactive. So every single day counts. And the one thing that I have learned through this whole process is that we have gotten to a place of thinking that it's out of our control. And I know very clearly that the minute that working people assert that we're going to take control, all of a sudden the political analysis changes.
Yep.
And that can happen now too. So people have to understand that this is unacceptable what's going on, and actually we can change it.
No, I'm right there with you. In fact, the day after the election, I said, okay, the election's over. Joe Biden's going to win. I feel very confident about that. But it's time to get to work. And I've been working with a bunch of striking workers who are fighting for, to maintain what standard of living they have. They don't have outrageous requests. They don't want, huge raises or anything. They just want to hold on to the standard of living they have. And this company is saying, no, we want you to pay more for your health care. We want to slap you in the face with a maintenance fee for your 401k. We want to tear down your working conditions. And these folks said no. And they went out on strike. And, to their credit, they took a stand. And the thing is probably half to 3/4 of them voted for Donald Trump. And I don't want to rub their nose in it, but what I'm saying is that this is an opportunity to where if you want to make America great, or if you want to build back better, or whatever you want to do, for me, that's the place where you do it. You do it out on the picket lines. You do it taking on and fighting the right fights.
Yeah, 100%. And let me just say, if people want to look for how to contribute to the strike and how to help out, search for the hashtag #NavistarDoBetter. Thanks to Rick Smith, because we should help these strikers. That is how we can do the most to be the best of America right now, is to help striking workers who are standing up, even against all odds, but demanding that, hey, listen, we need our fair share of the value we create here.
Absolutely.
And this is a time I often find in crises they'll break down people mentally and make them think that it's a time when everyone has to sacrifice. And that's just not the truth. There is no truth in that. That line is only for corporations who want to take more power, more control, ratchet down labor costs, create more productivity, so we're working harder than ever. So we don't even have the time to think and dream about better days. That's what they're hoping for. That's the kind of conditions they're trying to create here. And so those strikers are my heroes today.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is because the Trump NLRB has been horrible. The Trump Labor Department has been absolutely horrible. I'm hoping that Joe Biden chooses a labor secretary who's actually going to be, and I think no matter who he chooses, they're going to be much better than anyone, Acosta or Scalia, that Donald Trump could have put in place. But I'm pushing for Bernie Sanders. I think Sanders would be terrific in that position, just like I think Elizabeth Warren would be terrific at Treasury.
Well, of course. I mean, Bernie Sanders lives and breathes labor. He starts everything from labor. He lives his life with the ideals of labor, solidarity, and leaving no one behind. So, of course, he'd be the best labor secretary we've ever seen. And that would be a great choice. I'll tell you what, though, no matter who is labor secretary, no matter who is Treasury secretary, no matter who is in the White House, if we don't have a ground game, we don't have a democracy. Because we cannot look to the Democrats for leadership. And I don't mean that we shouldn't be asking the President of the United States to take leadership. That's not my point. My point is that this is a democracy. It means that every voice counts. It means that everybody gets to have their say. It means that we all get to participate. And what that means is voting is really important. But between the time we have to hold our elected representatives accountable. I mean, it's not enough that exit polls say that 72% of Americans on a Fox News poll think that we should have government-run health care. The only way that we are actually going to get health care for all is if we organize a ground game in every single district and force it on our representatives. FDR said, "Make me do it." That's what we have to do. We have to make our representatives do it. And we have to understand that power resides with us, not with them.
Yeah, and again, I think it's one of those things that we have to relearn. Much like these workers who not one of them have ever been on strike before, and they are now feeling the empowerment that comes with that. as well as the responsibility and the struggle, obviously, that comes with it. But the idea that they have the power to actually, affect some change, I think that's infectious, and I want more people to feel that, because that's how we change things. I think you're absolutely right. It's not going to be who we put in a position of power. It's going to be from us making them do what we want them to do. But I have to say, it would really help to have someone like Sanders at labor.
100%. But the other thing about that ticket line, and the point that you have already made tonight, is that the people on that picket line, maybe half of them voted for Donald Trump, maybe even more, right? But on the picket line, it doesn't matter who they voted for, because they have way more in common than anything that can divide them, because they have all decided that they're going to stand out there together to get something done. And so we have to just shatter this idea that we are a divided nation. We have to shatter this idea that, we're divided by politics. It's just not true, because when you bring a group of people together and you define what's at stake, and then you ask them what they're willing to do about it, you get a group of people who are united suddenly. And so we have to do that. We have to pick these fights. We have to define what's at stake, and then we have to take action around it.
And ultimately, we have to support each other when it happens, because, for me, this idea, I think this generation is starting to relearn that concept of solidarity that every generation has to find in their own way. And I think I think this pandemic has highlighted how vulnerable we are as a working class, especially on the healthcare front. Because I've talked to people who've finally come to the realization that, maybe employer-based health insurance isn't the best way to go.
Yeah, when there's tens of millions of people filing for unemployment and at the same time losing their health care, maybe, this shared experience is going to give us the greatest organizing opportunity ever. And so actually labor needs to be revving up right now, because we can organize in the millions, because you've got all these people across different industries who have this shared experience at the same exact time, and spreading the word that we have the answers in labor, and we have a sustained way to be able to fight back and retain power and give them some control in their lives. That's the message that people are looking for right now, and we can give it to them. And we can totally change politics. We can totally change, and I'm saying politics for the working people. I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about making politics work for us. We can change that entirely, and we can take control, and we can have people coming to us, not asking to have our issues heard. That's the kind of world that we were living in when we had union density at around 35-40% in this country, and that's where we need to get back to.
Yeah, but ultimately, we can organize and organize and organize. If the laws are on the side of the employers and the pendulum has swung as it has that far, politics still plays a part in it. But we need to get our boots in the ground and out into the streets. Sarah, as always, I appreciate the time, your passion. Thank you so much for the work you do. You're one of my heroes, one of the people I look to for inspiration. I appreciate it.
All right. Give my love to the other Sarahs tonight. And thanks for everybody listening. Rick, I'll talk to you soon.
Good stuff. Thanks so much. Sarah Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA. Again, one of my favorite people on the inner tubes as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1996. That was the day that Chainsaw Al Dunlop lived up to his nickname. Under his leadership, the board of the Sunbeam Corporation agreed to eliminate half of the company's 6,000 employees and 87% of all its products. Dunlop had built a reputation for ruthlessly restructuring companies. His policy of implementing sweeping layoffs and plant closures earned him the nickname Chainsaw Al. In the mid-1990s, the company had several quarters of profits below projections. They decided to bring in Chainsaw Al. The day after he was announced as the CEO, Sunbeam's stock soared 60% just 3 days after taking the job. Dunlop declared to reporters, "We've got too many people, too many products, too many facilities, and too many headquarters." He brought in consultants to review the company's operations and recommend drastic cuts. The resulting cuts were so severe that Sunbeam could not fill production orders. Despite this, Dunlop continued to promise record profits. Sunbeam's stock continued to rise, by 1997 hitting a record of $50 a share. But the revenue reports were actually a result of Dunlop's creative accounting. In June of 1998, the house of cards came crashing down. Sunbeam's board met to discuss the company's woeful finances. Just 2 years after Chainsaw Al was brought into the company, he was fired. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission investigated what happened at Sunbeam and banned Chainsaw Al from ever holding another CEO position. In 2001, the company filed for bankruptcy. Such chainsaw techniques are not unique to Al or Sunbeam. Cutting workers to drive up stock market value continues to be a strategy for many CEOs.
Good grief, cry many progressives. How has America turned so right-wing that a flabby, narcissistic, wannabe dictator like Trump was even in the running? But wait, aside from a minority of racist, xenophobic, misogynistic voters, plus a bunch of uber-wealthy corporate profiteers making a killing from his rich man's agenda, most of Trump's rank-and-file voters are not right-wingers at all. To see evidence of this, look at the multitude of overtly progressive ballot issues that won majority support on Election Day, even in so-called Trump country. 53% of Arizona voters said yes to a tax surcharge on incomes above $250,000 a year, specifically to raise teacher pay and recruit more teachers. A whopping 78% of Oregon voters approved a populist proposition to put strict controls on the corrupting power of big money corporate donations and elections. 61% of Floridians voted to raise the state's minimum wage to $15 an hour, a working class advance vehemently opposed by corporate giants and right-wing groups. 57% voted yes on a Colorado provision requiring corporations to let employees earn paid time off for medical and family needs. Between 53 and 69% of voters in 6 states, including in such supposedly conservative bastions as Arizona, Mississippi, and South Dakota, approved initiatives liberalizing and even legalizing marijuana and other drug use. Plus, there were some big symbolic victories, such as Mississippi replacing a Confederate symbol on its state flag with a magnolia blossom. This is Jim Hightower saying, the hope that resides in these progressive policy positions is the prospect that a truly great American majority might yet be forged, not around some mega politician, but around our people's basic values of fairness and justice for all.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
There's some days that I really love the internet, and I love Twitter, especially when they're beating up on somebody like Senator John Cornyn from Texas, who evidently went to bed early on election night when they called Puerto Rico for Joe Biden. No, they didn't actually. But evidently the good senator tweeted out, another example of why it's prudent to let the process run its course. Thousands of uncounted votes found a week after election in Puerto Rico. They had a list. They had a story from the New York Times that said, yeah, there are these boxes that have been uncounted. Problem is, I don't think he actually read it or I don't think he actually knew that Puerto Rico doesn't have anything to do with the presidential election because they're not officially a state. They don't have actually any electors. And it's even one of these moments where even Rudy Giuliani's got to be laughing at him, going, "Boy, I got that. I got that Four Seasons landscaping thing, but boy, you screwed up." Yeah, fun. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the fun of the day, I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. Sarah is a fantastic reporter over at the website Raw Story. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, happy Thursday.
So Puerto Rico got a lot of votes. Donald Trump's got a bunch of votes in Puerto Rico waiting for him because of the paper towels, right?
Totally because of the free paper towels. I mean, you chuck all those paper towels at people, and they're clearly gonna vote for you. Fool. I honestly think that this is a really good step for him to support statehood, because if he wants those electors to be there, then I got no problem with that. I think Puerto Rico, especially after how much they got screwed during Hurricane Maria, they deserve everything that we can possibly give to them, including statehood.
Yeah, I mean it's but I guess this is one of those things where even a U.S. senator, because I get people tweeting stuff all the time, and you go, "Did you actually read the story or just the headline?" Because sometimes the headlines and the stories don't actually match because they're two different people writing them. So this is one of those moments where see they count the votes.
200 boxes of ballots in a city election.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's not just that he didn't read it. The fact that he looked at that and he saw Puerto Rico, and his first thought was, we need to find out, what those votes are for Donald Trump. Never mind that, he found out the story had nothing to do with it. The fact that he didn't know that Puerto Rico has no electoral votes, as a U.S. senator, I have concerns. I have serious concerns.
Yeah.
I feel like that was something, I think I maybe learned that in middle school civics class, like 7th grade-ish. I think that's when I learned that.
I'm not sure when I learned it, but I remember always knowing it.
Yeah, it's something that I feel like I've known for a very, very long time, and also thought for a long time they deserve to be a real state. I think honestly, all of our territories deserve to be a real state because they're getting screwed right and left.
But here's the thing, and this is one of those moments where you start going, I know that in the past we've done literacy tests for people to be able to vote, but we've never done literacy tests for people who were voting for.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before too, where we've said we wish that there was some mental health exam that could happen for some of these folks. I feel like Rand Paul, maybe that would be difficult for him to pass. Yeah. So John Cornyn.
Yay. And,
I think we should send him a civics book. I think I might have an old civics book laying around that I could send him.
Okay, and we can underline the part that has that in it. We can, put a little tab on it so we can check, make it easy.
Post-it note with an arrow.
There you go, right here.
Highlight it.
There you go. Good. Speaking of another crazy senator, I look at Georgia, the appointed Kelly Loeffler. Evidently, Kelly is looking at her opponent, this Raphael Warnock, as the most radical candidate in America. And for a second, I had to stop and go, the most radical candidate in America. And my mind started going, and I go, compared to her, yeah, probably. She compared herself to Attila the Hun. So I guess
I would say anybody at this point is more radical than Kelly Loeffler.
So I was fact checking it in my mind. There are only 4 people running for office right now. She's clearly Attila the Hun. Maybe Raphael is the most radical. I don't know, maybe feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and giving shelter to the homeless and healing the sick. Maybe that is just too radical for Kelly the Hun.
Yeah, and one of the things that they talk about a lot in the Bible is how radical Jesus Christ was. In fact, they killed him for being a little too radical. So I feel like that's probably something that the good pastor knows a little bit of something about. Kelly Loeffler, the interesting thing about her is not only does she think that he is so radical, she actually begged him for time in his pews behind him while he was preaching for MLK Day. So it's like the Reverend is perfect whenever you need him for a photo op, but God forbid you run against him. And then it's like, oh no, we gotta keep those pastors in their place. And just absurd to me. Warnock, actually, if you read a couple of interviews about him where he talks about his faith and how it inspires him to help people, it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
He is coming at this from what I feel like is the true measure of what public service is. And that is the leadership. Oh my gosh, that is what we need in this country. More of that instead of this corrupt ideology of how can I use this office to benefit myself, which is what I feel like Loeffler has really spent the last couple of years doing.
No, I mean, she's the poster child for that. But, you know, Warnock, from what I've read, you know, I grew up in the Catholic Church back at a time when it was about peace and social justice.
Yeah.
It was about, you know, doing those good things. And now the Catholic Church here in the U.S. kind of turned, you know, kind of mean and ugly. The abortion thing seems to be their main issue, and hooray for me, and the heck with everybody else seems to be right there. But, you know, I remember growing up in those moments where you had priests walking picket lines. You know, you had them setting up food banks and doing all of this stuff. Yeah, I'd like to see more of that and less of the prosperity gospel, hooray for me, and the hell with everybody else.
When I used to work at Uni here, we had a priest on staff who worked a lot with our members, and every time we would do strikes, we would bring faith leaders together, and they would do hunger strikes, and they would do that kind of protest that is indicative of the faith movement. And I was heartened today. I opened my email, and there was a recounting of a phone call that Joe Biden had with the Pope, where they talked about things like feeding the needy and trying to cut poverty down in the world and helping refugees and all of these really beautiful things. And I was like, oh my God, we're back. You know, like, finally, this is my country. This is the country I want us to be. And so I look at people like Reverend Warnock, and I just think, yes, for the love of God, more of these guys, more of this kind of leadership. And it's not just in the Senate, not just in the House and in politics, but I think all of us is, you know, as activists, we want to come at this from a place of love and compassion and help and aid. And I forget that sometimes, you know?
No, we get so mired and we get so tied up in, you know, we got to win, and we're battling with the other side, that all of that other stuff we forget. And, you know, I keep saying that I'm a supporter of government because our government does the things that we want to do that we can't do individually. The high aspirations of, you know, of things that we want to do individually but can't is where we do that in government. I think we could end homelessness. I think we could end hunger. I think we could end all of the horrible things that happen if we just put our mind to it. But yet, you know, we seem to be, well, still hating on each other a little bit.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who want their tax cuts.
And want their tax cuts. And speaking of dividing us, we have our divider in chief, who I got to tell you, you know, I'm looking at his Twitter feed and some of the things he's put out. Yeah, pushing a little conspiracy, he is. In fact, you know, I guess he pushed a story by OAN that was actually absolute and total, complete fake news. Tell me a little bit about it.
So the great people of OAN, bless their hearts, they concocted the story about Dominion voter systems, which I guess supplies a series of electronic voting machines in several different states. Somehow they came up with this idea that a research firm called Edison Research, they somehow created a study saying that there were a whole bunch of Trump ballots that had disappeared. A whole bunch of Trump votes that had disappeared because of these electronic voting machines. The problem is when you actually call the nice people of Edison Research and you say, hey, did y'all say this? Because I'm not finding this report anywhere on your website linked from your Twitter account or posted on your Facebook. Can you help me out with this? And they're like, yeah, no, we never said that. We never published any report saying that. We don't even talk about that stuff. We don't know anything about voter fraud. To our knowledge, it never really happened. And so then you have these reports, and then all of a sudden the OAN report magically disappeared from the internet. So when you click on that link of the story, it just gives you a 404 error. They've deleted the tweet from their website, but Donald Trump's tweet talking about the story and OAN's retweet of his tweet are still there, and they're spreading a lot of misinformation to over, I think it was 500,000 people clicked that they liked it, and nearly 200,000 people retweeted it. So talk about your misinformation.
Yeah. Well, it's my view they were started just for this purpose. Because
Yeah.
I have relatives who consume OAN, and they tell me all the time, no, they're right down the middle. And I'm going, Uncle so and
In
so.
what world?
It's right on their website that they're a conservative outlet. It's right there. They're at least honest about that.
They're right down the middle between Fox News and Alex Jones. Like that one is. Even Alex Jones, I feel like, is a little bit closer to OAN as a conspiracy theorist who doesn't believe in 9/11.
But this is one of those things where, at some point, don't these organizations have to? Isn't there something that you go? There's a penalty somehow for making stuff up? Because, like you said, this was a simple calling the company that they claimed, put out the report, and there's no report. I mean, you could say, look, I had they didn't even go with the anonymous source. I mean, come on.
No, they cited the actual company, which you can find by Googling, and they have the phone number on the website, and you can send an info email, which goes to the guy that was quoted, and I'm sure he's really hacked off from all of the inquiries that he's receiving today. And I was trying really hard to be polite, being like, I'm so sorry to ask you this. I just need to confirm this. Did you really say this? And he was like, oh, let me tell you. So I feel bad for that. That's their afternoon, right? That's what they've had to deal with. And I don't understand how these people can still exist on social media. These major social media companies are putting these tiny little disclaimers that most people don't even believe, instead of just saying, no. Like we find the fake stuff. It's confirmed. We're deleting this. You don't get to put this on our website.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I look at the story that came across my desk today about Facebook, and evidently they're not banning Steve Bannon, who they claim didn't violate enough of their protocol to be banned. And this is a guy who said, Fauci and Christopher Wray should be beheaded and their heads on spikes outside the White House. I don't know. That seems like a violation of something.
That is totally something that the Secret Service would go and investigate and could bring charges to. If you threaten somebody like that, then that's usually a big deal. And I feel like, Facebook likes to take stuff off of their website of people in the act of crimes, right? A lot of people who are live streaming their shootings or whatever horrible things that they can come up with. But when the before action, the threat is somehow not worth deleting. That's just unacceptable to me. Yeah. And again, this is the reason that I think we should say no to Facebook and shut down our accounts.
Yeah, we just post like show clips and stuff. I don't really do any interacting on Facebook. I don't post photos or anything anymore. It's just a matter of just where we put stuff in case there are folks who want to listen to the show. But I got away from it completely because it's turned into this cesspool, and it's one of these spots where this conservative idea of laissez-faire, free market ideology is a failure. I mean, economically, it's a complete and total failure because it's nothing but a race to the bottom. And to be honest, evidently we've learned that laissez-faire, free market thinking on social media is a race to the bottom because you got bottom feeders like Bannon.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why coalitions of these social media sites that go to Congress and testify and pretend like, oh, we want you to regulate us, but they know it's never going to happen because they're spending a heck of a lot of money to make sure it doesn't happen.
No.
So here's hoping that maybe we can win the Senate in a special election in January, and we can slap some regulations on some of the social media lies and threats that people have to deal with.
There you go. But here's the thing: as long as you got Loeffler out there going, he's the most radical ever. You're gonna get people all twisted up in the panties, and I've had I can't tell you how many people have told me that Joe Biden is this uber socialist, and I'm going, I don't know where you're getting that.
Yeah.
I guess maybe if
The
you're
internet.
compared to Kelly the Hun, maybe that's true. I don't know. Some interesting news. I mean, today big day for coronavirus. We surpassed 150,000 cases today. Yay, winning. And it looks like a bunch of Republicans are getting it. Yay, more winning, including Don Young, the 87-year-old representative from Alaska, who is saying, hey, I got it, I'm okay, doing all right. We want our privacy. Thoughts?
It's not just Young who is getting this virus. There's another super spreader event that happened in the White House when Mark Meadows got it. A dozen White House staffers that have it. There's an outbreak at the Republican Party. I think they said something like 8 staffers who were in Washington and Philadelphia now have it as well. I saw the mayor of Tulsa, Oklahoma on MSNBC today begging for help because the House Minority Leader was on TV earlier this week in Oklahoma saying that she wants to have a special session in the state because the governor won't do anything there. North Dakota has reached max capacity in their hospital beds. Tulsa reached max capacity in their ICU beds on Monday. I mean, this is not just, we have reached exactly, when we were talking about flattening that curve, we flattened the curve and now we're swinging back up big time. And this is what Fauci keeps talking about. This is why you have to wear a mask. And it really is to a point now where either you wear the mask or we're going to shut down again for another month or maybe more because there's no other option anymore. And if we want to stop people from dying, you got to choose one of those things. In Washington and a lot of places in the Northeast, I know New York, I've heard, people are wearing masks like crazy. It's amazing. I got to go to the Biden event on Saturday in Wilmington. I did not see one person without a mask on. But, I'm in Oklahoma and masks are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
And I have to assume that most of the Midwestern states that are having outbreaks like this, it's probably the same.
And it's sad. I mean, but the sad reality is there've been nobody on the Trump level that have died from this. And I shouldn't say that. The sad part is, fortunately for the people who have gotten it, it hasn't. But the message that it sends to their supporters is it's not a big deal. Just like the flu, you'll get over it. It'll be no problem. Hey, by the way, as I'm reminded constantly, Donald Trump got us plenty of ventilators. There are plenty of ventilators now. So when you get it, you'll have a ventilator.
If you're able to get a hospital bed, you will. If you don't if you've already reached max capacity at the ICU, then you're not getting anything.
That's good. But you maybe get to take one home. Because I'm told we've got tons of them. I'm told I have one guy who reminds me all the time that Donald Trump, he made the auto industry make ventilators.
It's like The Price is Right or like Oprah or somebody like, you get a ventilator, you get a ventilator, everybody gets a ventilator. Except that when you die, you don't really need a ventilator anymore. Yeah. So.
There you go. Can't take that with you. So I do have a question, though. I saw your story on Andrea Mitchell, who asked what stage of denial Donald Trump is in. Because after all, I mean, this is a guy who said we were going to get tired of winning. Doesn't look like we're winning, and he keeps losing these frivolous lawsuits one after another. So what level of denial are we actually in?
That was so funny because, Andrea Mitchell is this really... middle of the road, look who she's married to, Mr. Economist, lame man. And so she just was asking these normal questions, very monotone. And I'm sort of half paying attention, writing something else. And all of a sudden I just hear Andrea Mitchell go, what stage of denial is he in? And I was just like, Andrea Mitchell just totally went there. And bless his heart, Peter Alexander was like, honestly, it seems like there are a lot of people in the White House who are doing very proactive meetings. They have sort of a strategy to walk him through the realization that he's going to have to pack his bags and he's going to have to get out of here. Sheldon Adelson's newspaper in Las Vegas published an editorial today basically saying the same thing. Karl Rove is saying the same thing. So Trump had a nice lunch today with Pence Pompeo and Mnuchin. And I have to assume that the conversation was, sir, this is over. It's time to go. It's time to go to your lovely golf course in Florida with all the other COVID people and, enjoy your life.
Does he give a concession speech?
No, God, no. He'd have to admit that he lost then. And right now it's more about trying to find a way to blame other people or claim that it's a conspiracy, because then he can raise more money. He can get more notoriety. He can do more speeches, more rallies. He's already started another super PAC. So he's setting himself up for basically doing the same thing. I don't know if that means he's going to run in 2024. After watching him really decline over the last 4 years, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like in 4 years.
But
why somebody would then want to do that.
I still think he's going to cause headaches for the foreseeable future, which is why I think the Republicans haven't, just kind of dumped him by now, because they're afraid of the rabid base. Because at some point, if the party's going to heal itself or come somewhere near sanity, they got to dump this guy. Yeah,
they basically have to either dump Trump or they're just going to end up folding. And I think that, there are definitely some Republicans who are stepping up right now saying, they think that Joe Biden deserves to have an intelligence briefing, that this is about a national security issue for the country beyond just the politics of everything. But beyond that, these people are going to kiss Trump's ring at every chance they get, because they need to get reelected and they need his voters to do it.
No.
So unless they can tamp these voters down, I don't know how they're going to make it, how they're going to be able to create the party.
Yeah, fun days ahead. Most certainly fun days ahead, because I don't see Trump going anywhere. I don't see him going away. I see him being a thorn in the side, unlike past presidents who just go away. You didn't hear Obama say anything about Trump for the first couple of years at all, I don't think. I heard very little out of him. You didn't hear anything from Bush about Obama. That precedent, I believe, now completely dead. And from day one, I think he'll be attacking Biden like it's campaign season.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's going to be such a headache. I feel so bad for everybody who's going to have to deal with it.
But the good thing is he will no longer be in the White House. Anyway, Sarah, I appreciate the time. As always, fun, good stuff. You do fabulous work. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You as well. Our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter at Raw Story. Make sure you check out her work, rawstory.com, the website. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
One of the many merits of the excellent conversation I had yesterday with President-elect Joe Biden was that we were strongly agreed on the need to work together in the fight against climate change.
President-elect Joe Biden begins rebuilding U.S. climate policy at home and abroad. Federal Reserve warns climate change threatens to destabilize the financial system. Renewable energy industry defies COVID, gets set for record growth. Plus, Trump White House racing the red light to roll back environmental standards and wreck federal science on the way out the door.
That assumes they're going out the door. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
For all those of you who voted for President Trump, I understand the disappointment tonight. I've lost a couple times myself.
Wait a second. Why isn't he talking about shower pressure and how windmills give you cancer? That's so unpresidential.
Yes, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, did we ever figure out how many letters into the Greek alphabet we are now with hurricane or tropical storm or whatever called ETA?
Yes, that is 7th in the Greek alphabet.
So if it hits Florida twice, does that also make it the 8th letter at the same time?
No, it does not. But Tropical Storm Eta is hitting Florida a second time, even as the state is still struggling with heavy flooding from its first round of torrential rains just a few days ago. The National Hurricane Center says a record 30th named storm is likely to form in coming days. And yes, climate scientists warn that man-made global warming is changing hurricanes, with very warm ocean temperatures contributing to this year's record hyperactive hurricane season.
So Eta is the 7th letter. Theta, is that still out and about, that storm?
Yes.
And then there's a 9th one brewing as well?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
That would be Iota, pronounced Yoda.
Well, you don't have to show off.
In other news, the Trump administration is racing the red light, accelerating efforts to deregulate in its waning days with a flood of last-minute energy rollbacks, permitting decisions, and new rules to allow more toxic water pollution from power plants, weaken appliance energy efficiency standards, and scale back mine safety oversight.
Of course they are.
The Trump White House also fired the agency head that oversees regulation of electricity and natural gas, and removed the scientist in charge of the National Climate Assessment, the authoritative government-wide report on climate change, and they're going to install a climate science denier in his place.
How much damage can he do in about 70 days?
A lot if they can't get rid of him.
Why couldn't they get rid of him?
Because Trump has moved to change civil service rules so that his moles will be harder to remove.
We'll see about that.
The Washington Post reports that the incoming Biden administration plans an all-of-government approach to incorporate climate action into domestic, economic, and foreign policy, using executive branch authority to restructure parts of the federal government to move faster on global warming in every federal agency and department, even ones not typically associated with the environment, like the Treasury Department through trade policy, and the Agriculture Department, paying farmers to store carbon in their soils. Structural changes that don't require congressional action.
That's very cool.
Biden also began rebuilding relationships with U.S. allies this week and talking climate in calls with foreign heads of state. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson sounded downright elated about renewed U.S. leadership on climate change in advance of next year's COP26 UN Climate Summit.
The incoming Biden-Harris administration is able to make common cause with us. In particular, it was extremely exciting to talk to President-elect Biden about what he wants to do with the COP26 summit next year, Mr. Speaker, in which, as you know, the UK is leading the world in driving down carbon emissions and tackling climate change.
That is great. And by the way, Boris Johnson also called Donald Trump the previous president in one of his remarks.
Even the U.S. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, has finally formally acknowledged that failure to act swiftly on climate change threatens to destabilize the global financial system with abrupt changes in asset values. And while the oil industry is struggling because of the coronavirus pandemic crushing demand for oil, renewable energy is defying COVID. That's according to the notoriously cautious International Energy Agency in its annual report this week, announcing that renewable energy hit record growth in 2020, and the IEA projects that by 2025, renewables will become the largest source of electricity generation in the world, ending coal's 5 decades as the top power source. The IEA projects that by 2025, renewables will supply 1/3 of the world's electricity, a remarkably rapid shift that also will substantially reduce air pollution.
I told you months and months ago, maybe even years ago, sell your oil and coal stocks, buy renewable energy. Just saying. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said earlier, I got an email from the appointed senator of Georgia, Kelly Loeffler. Truth of the matter is I'm on everybody's email list. I get the emails so you don't have to. So I get to keep track of what nonsense they're putting out. And the appointed senator from Georgia, the subject line is what made me open the email and actually read through it. The subject line said, "My plan to destroy Joe Biden." And didn't really say anything about a plan. There was much like the Republican Party, no plan. Lots of accusations, like the liberal media is declaring Joe Biden our next president. No. Republican secretaries of state, like yours, kind of said, it is what it is. Don't see a way forward. I think sanity, reason, rational thought, that actual votes, that's what's decided that Joe Biden is going to be the president-elect, not the liberal media, if you can find that. But she goes into hitting some of the old favorites, like radical socialist agenda, got that in there, and the I need money. And then she hits in with, can you imagine Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as the Secretary of Treasury? We're going to block the left wing. I guess that's the plan. More gridlock, more obstruction, more GOP. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the runoff election, because all eyes now on Georgia. I've asked Sarah Riggs Amico to come talk with us. She's a former Georgia senatorial candidate. Also, the folks also runs Our America Super PAC, or Our America PAC. Right now, center of the universe, Georgia. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back. It's great to be at the center of the political universe. There are a lot of folks on the ground, a lot of organizations here in Georgia that have been working for a very long time for this. So we were proud to deliver 16 electoral college votes for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and we look forward to getting the Democrats back to the Senate majority as well.
Right, and your PAC, the Our American Dreams PAC, in the middle of this. Let me start with Loeffler's claim. She's got a plan to destroy Joe Biden. That's a little different than even as far as Mitch McConnell went and saying that we're going to make him Obama a one-term president. This is actually an act of aggression. We're going to destroy him, and thus I would argue destroy this country. I mean, it seems radical to me.
Look, it's not only radical, but the thing that's missing from Senator Loeffler's subject line in her email is any mention of the people of Georgia. If she spent half as much time making sure folks in Georgia were not sick because they're poor or poor because they got sick, she may not be in the fight for her life right now to keep that seat. But the reality is she will lose to Reverend Raphael Warnock, and that'll be one of the two seats that gives us the U.S. Senate, because she has no vision for the state. All she's focused on is tearing down other people. And we all know that if you have to focus on tearing others down, it's because you're unable to build yourself up.
Right. But, and she's got nothing, because not only is she going to destroy Joe Biden, evidently Reverend Warnock is the, in her words, quote, the most radical candidate in America.
Yeah, if I had a nickel for every time a Republican candidate said that about a Democrat, I'd probably never have to work again. The reality is that she has nothing to run on.
Right.
Both David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler hitched their wagons to the wrong horse. They hitched their entire campaign value proposition to the voters of Georgia on their loyalty to Donald Trump. And the thing is, there are 10.5 million Georgians who are counting on our 2 U.S. senators to do their damn job. And so it was the wrong play. And now Trump has lost. And the reality is we're in the middle of a pandemic that is out of control, 150,000 cases in a single day, 2 states, Texas and California, that have exceeded 1 million cases of COVID-19 because of the failure of Donald Trump's leadership. We've lost over 10 million jobs. Nearly 4 million of those they expect to be permanent job losses in this economy. Tens and tens of millions of Americans who filed for first-time unemployment claims in this pandemic because Donald Trump and his administration, enabled by people like David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, have failed us.
Yeah,
they have nothing to run on.
No, you're right, and I wouldn't just blame Donald Trump for the failure, because look, both Loeffler and Perdue could have done something to work with Democrats, and in the interim. The fact of the matter is, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate have done everything they can do to gridlock any help for stimulus, because there are families out there who are really struggling, or to do anything to hold Trump accountable. They could have acted to pull the president into line. They chose not to. They chose to follow the leader. And we're now in a moment where day after day, we're setting records for the number of viruses, the number of people infected with the virus. And this is, I got to be honest, this is the kind of winning that I was expecting. But it is the kind of winning I'm tired of.
Yeah, and look, here's the thing. We've got 2 U.S. senators in Georgia who knew how bad this pandemic would be. They knew enough to go and adjust their own stock portfolios and profit off of a pandemic that's killed over 8,000 Georgians. So they knew it was coming, and rather than buckle down and get the work done to protect our people, protect their health care, save their jobs, they went off and made money by trading in stocks.
No.
There is no greater dereliction of duty I can think of in recent history, to be honest. It's an absolute, if it's not criminal, it should be. And the reality is Georgia voters know better. They are not going to send these 2 people back to the U.S. Senate so that they can continue to profit off a pandemic that's killed,
Yeah. I had a
thousands
friend,
and thousands of Georgians.
I had my friend Eric Robertson on the program a couple of days ago, who's an activist in Atlanta.
Good guy.
Eric's one of my favorite people, and he said, look, if we let people vote, if we allow everyone access to the ballot box, Georgia is overwhelmingly a blue state. And ultimately, it's about opening up the ability for people to vote and making sure that people vote. How are things going at this point? Because, look, 250,000 people in the last election were thrown off the voter rolls. 200,000 people this last time purged from the voter rolls. Are we seeing the same kind of shenanigans in this? Because I think a lot of us don't know the mechanism for your runoff. Are there ways of throwing more people off between now and then? How do they work out?
Really the great thing about Georgia, because of our laws, we can actually register about 100,000 new voters for this runoff on January 5th. For Georgians who will be 18 years old by January 5th, you still have about a month to register to vote in this runoff election. So we can actually add to the voter rolls. We have added over 1 million Georgians to our voter rolls since the 2016 presidential election, 800,000 of those since the midterms. So, yes, we continue to have devastating voter purges here. Over 1 million former Georgians leading up to the midterm elections were purged from the rolls. Many of those, as you know, simply for choosing not to vote for a couple of cycles. It's a shame. But the good news is I still think democracy rises. People here want representation that's meaningful to them and to their family, who will fight for them and their family. And voters are showing up. So I have every faith that we will not only see additional voters registered for that runoff, additional Democrats registered for that runoff. I think you're going to see the kind of turnout from Georgia Democrats that we've never seen in a runoff. I'd bet good money on that.
No, well, look, the eyes of the nation, the future of the republic is on the line here. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I mean, there is so much that needs to be done in this moment to have gridlocked government with Mitch McConnell, who's already said he's not going to do anything that the Democrats want on a stimulus. I think is devastating for this country, and I think will cause irreparable harm if we can't get some action going forward.
Yeah, I have every faith that the people of Georgia are going to deliver the U.S. Senate that this country deserves. We have worked for years to build the kind of ground game and infrastructure for the Democratic Party to register voters. We have countless activists and organizers who have been doing this work for years, if not decades. We are ready. We were ready for November 3rd. We are ready for January 5th. We have 2 great Senate candidates. We also, remember, have a statewide race for the Public Service Commission with Daniel Blackman. We have the chance to elect the first Latina district attorney in Athens-Oconee County, and Deborah Gonzalez, on December 1st. So we actually have 2 runoffs coming up, one for the district attorney on December 1st, and then the January 5th runoffs for our Senate candidate and our statewide office, there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of motivation for Georgians. And look, yes, this election has national consequences, but the reality is Georgians are also picking U.S. senators to represent the people of our state and our interests. And I don't believe they're going to send David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler back to continue to try to take away health care from Georgians in the middle of a pandemic.
Right.
I don't see anything in David Perdue or Kelly Loeffler's record that merits them keeping their jobs. In fact, they've both been absent. They've profited off a pandemic. They refuse to engage in questions with voters because they do not have good answers or a good record. We are ready for this runoff, and we will deliver the U.S. Senate and put this country back on track, help Joe Biden finish winning that battle for the soul of this country.
Does David Perdue debate Ossoff again, or does he bail again?
Not if he knows what's good for him. He got a smackdown in the last one, and then bailed. Of course, he chickened out of their third debate after John read him the riot act, and rightfully so. I mean, this is a guy that sat in the Senate for 6 years, taking a taxpayer paycheck, and refused to hold a single town hall for voters. I've had 24 town halls for employees in the last couple of years. I mean, what's his excuse? It's nuts. We as candidates, we hold these town halls all the time, unless you're named David Perdue. And, Kelly Loeffler was so out of touch with the average Georgia family, with working families. She ran an actual commercial about how she used her private jet to help Georgia citizens. I mean, it doesn't get any more tone deaf than pandemic profiteering, private jets, and hiding on your private island rather than being out there talking to voters about what they need you to do to get the job done.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I hope the good folks of Georgia do come out, because you guys have a really interesting system that I'm actually in favor of. I think in order to hold elective office, you should have the consent of the populace. You should have a majority of the people supporting you. We shouldn't have if you have 3 candidates, 48% doesn't get it. I think you have to have 50+1. I'm a big fan of ranked choice voting. I think I would prefer instant runoff voting as opposed to what you guys do, because it's a lot. But I think we need to be talking about different ways of allowing people to access the franchise, and different ways for states to make the choices that they make.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We've got to have a way where we don't need to draw this out quite so much. And I think ranked choice voting, we can now watch what it's done in Maine. We can see how it's working. It's certainly an option going forward. And so the system here, you're correct. You have to win 50% of the vote plus 1 vote in order to avoid a runoff. And in this instance, that really sets up a highly nationalized race, because it will be for control of the U.S. Senate. The current tally is, of course, 50 Republican senators have been elected for next January's Congress, and 48 Democrats, plus the 2 runoffs. So a 50-50 Senate, when Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock win these races here in Georgia on January 5th, the 50-50 Senate will have the tie-breaking vote go to Vice President Kamala Harris, now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris. So it's a critical race. But again, my great hope, and this is why I lean so heavily on local activists and organizers, people like Eric Robertson, who've been on the ground doing this work for a very long time in Georgia. We have got to make sure the people of this state stay centered. We know and we understand the national consequences. I have every faith the people of Georgia will deliver the U.S. Senate this country deserves in January. But we also need to keep the conversation about what's happening to people in Georgia. We have rural hospitals still closing, another one last week, alarming rates in the middle of a pandemic. We have Black Georgians who die at twice the rate from COVID-19, like Black Americans across this country. We have got to address these issues. And I think if we center those stories of Georgians around health care, around economic justice and opportunity, that's how we're going to win this race. This race can't be framed as a Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi versus Mitch McConnell, right? It really needs to be about what's best for your family if you live in Georgia. And if that's the conversation, I guarantee you we win both these races.
Well, let's hope that happens. And people get out to the polls. I did want to ask you last line of questioning to change topics a little bit because
Sure.
we're going to recount every ballot in Georgia, which I'm all in favor of. I think making sure that we get the count right is an absolute must, no matter who wins, what happens. I think the will of the people be done. It just seems interesting that you've got the Secretary of State, this Brad Parker, I guess, Perger.
Raffensperger.
I always screw that up. The Republican Secretary of State, who said that the probes that they're doing for supposed voter fraud not going to change the projected outcome, not going to change Joe Biden winning the state. I thought that was pretty. I thought that was pretty important for a Republican Secretary of State to come out and say, especially from Georgia.
Absolutely. In fact, President Donald Trump lied through his teeth about this. He went and gave a press conference saying democratically controlled states like Georgia were trying to steal the election. And the fact of the matter is, not only is our Secretary of State, our Chief Elections Officer, a Republican, every single statewide executive office in this state, all 13 of them are held by Republicans. Both majorities in the House and the Senate in Georgia, also Republicans. So this is very much a Republican-run election in the state. And the Secretary of State has effectively capitulated to political pressure with this recount. The people of Georgia are going to pay for this. Everybody with any degree of credibility has said this won't change the outcome. And the fact of the matter is, according to our laws, after this result is certified on November 20th, we may be headed for an additional recount because by law in Georgia, the recount has to be a scan of the QR code on the ballot. The legal ballot here in Georgia is the QR code, not the human readable text. So what they're doing in the hand recount is it's sort of a combination of a risk limiting audit and a recount. Sort of covers a little bit of those bases, and I appreciate that they're doing that. But they're going to have a human read the text of 5 million ballots that were cast in the presidential race. But they are not going to rescan those ballots. And the way our votes are counted in Georgia is that QR code on your ballot. And so it could well be that after these results on November 20th are certified, we could actually be headed for a recount after the recount they're going to do right now. So yes, it's important to count every ballot. I always appreciate when somebody is trying to assure the voters of confidence in our democratic system, to make people know how much their vote counts. And look, in an election in Georgia where we delivered the state for Joe Biden by 14,000 votes out of 10.5 million people in the state, we know our votes count. So I appreciate what they're doing, but I do worry that it's a little bit of political theater and that we may well end up in a second recount here in the next week or two.
Yeah. No, one of the things, I look at Georgia as one of those states where Trump and company are claiming there's voter fraud and all this stuff, and that Joe Biden cheated, and the Democrats cheated, and and my mindset is if they actually did that, wouldn't they have also I don't know, helped Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff win too? Wouldn't that have been the smart thing to do? I mean, if you're going to cheat, if you have the ability to cheat, wouldn't you actually make it benefit you?
I'd have flipped the state house for Georgia Democrats.
Yeah.
They were well within spitting distance of doing that. So, yes, I mean, these are obviously baseless allegations, much like everything else in Trump's presidency. This is a guy who can't win on his own merits, and he knew it as president. And then there were people like Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue who said, good on you, and backed him anyway. And I think the voters of Georgia are about to deliver a pretty harsh judgment on that behavior. And yes, there's been absolutely no credible evidence of any sort of voter fraud or any sort of shenanigans whatsoever in this election. And in fact, we've seen statewide elected officers, including the lieutenant governor, who I ran against in 2018 when I was the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor. He said the same thing. He's seen no credible evidence. So, look, it's not going to change the outcome. But if it does help ease the transition and lend credibility to a Biden-Harris administration, I'm certainly sympathetic to that, right? And the reality is the Biden administration will be tackling dueling crises of public health and COVID-19 and the economy and jobs. And we have got to give them every bit of support. And as Americans, we've got to come together. Joe Biden's reached his hand out. He said, look, you didn't have to vote for me. I'm still going to be your president. I ran as a Democrat, but I'm going to be an American president. He's saying all the right things. He's looking at a bipartisan cabinet. He is willing to listen, and he's surrounded by good, competent, qualified people. And we saw that in his selection of his chief of staff yesterday. So I have every confidence. But as a people, we also have to make that choice to move into this next phase, to leave the Trump era behind us, to leave these wild, baseless allegations of voter fraud behind us, and get to the work that people need us to do in this country and need Joe Biden and his administration and the Senate to do in this country to save our jobs and defeat this pandemic. That has to be top of mind for everyone.
There you go, right there. Sarah, I appreciate the time. Always great talking with you. I hope you'll come back as this continues and as it heats up and share what's going on the ground.
Absolutely, Rick. It's always good to be with you. Thanks again.
I appreciate your time. Sarah Riggs Amico, she, again, one of my favorite folks down there in Georgia. Make sure you check out their website, OurAmericanDreamsPack.com. Good stuff. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day that healthcare workers in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, walked off the job in a wildcat strike. Budget cuts in Alberta, under the leadership of Premier Ralph Klein, had hit healthcare particularly hard. A massive restructuring plan called for deep cuts, privatization, and reducing services. As part of this trend, the Calgary Regional Health Authority had decided to contract out the work of 120 laundry personnel. The workers were members of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 8. The laundry workers walked off the job in protest. Soon, they were joined in solidarity on the picket line by housekeepers, orderlies, nurses, and other hospital workers. 8 hospitals across the city were impacted by the walkout. Community members joined in and marched on the picket lines, frustrated by the government cuts. Twice, the Labor Relations Board ordered the workers to go back to their jobs. Twice, the workers refused. The strike spread to Calgary, where more than 2,500 healthcare workers walked off the job. In Edmonton, workers stood ready to strike. Talk of a general strike began to circulate. In Calgary, the union met with management for a 19-hour marathon bargaining session, and the 10-day strike ended. The health authority agreed to wait 8 months before contracting out any labor. Workers were given severance packages, and the government stopped any further cuts to the industry. But the settlement did little to appease the dissatisfaction of the healthcare workers. The strike had also shown the potential connections between workers' issues on the job and the concerns of community members. The cutbacks hurt both labor and the general public and brought them together to stand in solidarity. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I think one of my favorite stories today I got from Local 10 in Miami. They're the news organization down in Miami, Local 10 News. They had a story on, evidently they have found evidence that state Senate candidates were planted into races by dark money funds, by people who have, bad intention. And my thought was, the Republicans have been doing this for a very long time, as have the Democrats. But the Democrats have done it because of, I have an ideology and I'm going to be, Ralph Nader, Jill Stein. the Democrats do it for that reason. The Republicans have figured out in a lot of places strategically, you throw somebody in to draw some votes away from the other side. The difference here is it looks like they've made people up. And this is where I guess we're now going to have AI candidates because as they're pointing out that they don't have any issues. They don't do any campaigning. They have no platform. It sounds like a Republican. And the idea was you just pull a few of the votes away from the Democrats and bang, you have won an election. And the election that they point out is the 37th state district seat in Florida, where Elian Garcia, the Republican, beat Jose Javier Rodriguez by, it looks like, 30 votes. And this Alex Rodriguez, who had no party affiliation, took 6,300 votes. And you got to wonder where they targeted that. Look, like I've always said, Republicans are much better at playing the game. And they're much more devious about it. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show.